It's been less than a week since the state election results were announced, and a big part of the country is rejoicing. A big part of the country has been in a little bit of shock. And depending on what you read, who you follow, you've probably been getting one side of the analysis of what really happened and what do the election results in India really mean. So we thought we will find you somebody who is non-partisan, मतलब वो किसी भी party को belong नहीं करते हैं, somebody who has spent his life studying politics and power and ideology and voters' behavior. Somebody with many degrees, the most in this chat, who we are very grateful to have join us today to explain what the election results in India mean. Rahul Verma, thank you very much for agreeing to do this for us, because we have been so confused and wondering, yaar, what does this all mean, that we needed you to do this.
Thank you, Tarana. Thank you so much for having me.
Now, Rahul, let me, you have different perspectives on this. You're a fellow at the Center of Policy Research, so it's an independent think tank. You're literally looking through reams of data constantly. You're doing an analysis. You're invariably on the ground. You also teach political science at, you're a professor at Ashoka University. Now, what I also find interesting is one of the books that you have written, Ideology and Identity, which, correct me if I'm wrong, it's a study of how political dynasties, some do well, some do not. Is that?
No. So, Jaggu, that's my doctoral dissertation, the Dynasties one, and that book will come out later when I finish it. The Ideology and Identity book was written with my PhD advisor, Tarana, and that basically argues against this idea that Indian politics is not ideological. It's somehow we have been trained to think that Indians vote by getting some samosa, some sari, some money, and they don't have any ideas on which they vote. So we basically argue against that dominant theme, and we say our ideological framework is not like Western Europe or North America. The ideological divisions or structure of our politics is very different. And so to describe that, we actually go back to the documents that were written during freedom movement, including Constituent Assembly debates, to show that, one, these were the founding ideas of modern India on which the divisions exist, and then using survey data going back to 67 to show that there is a consistent division between people who vote for BJP, people who vote for Congress, and people who vote for left party. So that's the ideology and identity about.
Okay, so clearly you have spent many years studying this, and you are in the right place to explain to us. Okay, were the election results surprising to you? Because to the lay person, we were seeing, we were seeing, COVID could possibly hurt the, the government that is currently in power. Each particular state had not been particularly happy with their state government. Economy is in a bit of a mess, fuel prices. And then we saw the opposition leaders rallies sort of get like huge crowds. So it was a bit surprising to see such a skewed and one-sided result. Was it surprising to you?
So yes and no. The reason it is always surprising, and the elections fascinate me. So if they don't surprise you, then you are not going to spend, as you described, lifetime studying, right? You never know what the result is going to be. And I also am I spend a lot of time watching and reading about cricket. So much like cricket, even when you know that a team is strong and can win, until the second team starts playing and the match is more than half away, you cannot really know which team is going to win. Right. So even in the elections, though you, depending upon what your reading of elections are, you have some idea what might be going to happen, but you cannot fully predict any election result. Anyone who thinks that even before the results have been declared, or at least lots of exit polls have come out, that you exactly know what is going to happen, not even politicians. Not even Prime Minister Modi. No one actually knows what the final outcome of result is going to be, because there are millions of people involved. How can you read millions of minds without having, say, a big data set, right? So only if you have a big data set with a big sample that you can figure out something. But those are still estimating uncertainty. You're not estimating the final outcome. So in that sense, the surprising part was the extent of victory, say for BJP in UP or Aam Aadmi Party in Punjab. But whether there were some parties poised ahead, I wasn't surprised about that, because the way I think about the elections, so two things. One, I think the structure of competition dictates who is ahead in the race. And so we make this mistake of reading elections through rallies and through body language of leaders and whether they fumbled or not. Those are not, in fact, I've written about it. All of this together might give you a sense, but if you are looking at only one indicator, you are going to make a mistake. In any rally, this is India, right? Like you just throw a stone and it will fall on 100 people. So any leader of a national stature, whenever he or she is going to conduct a rally, you will see a crowd of like 50,000 people. So those should not be an indicator of whether a party is going to do well or not. Final point, which is about, and this is again a mistake. This is a very, very hard thing, even for people who study elections for a long time, because there are hundreds of issues that go into making a vote. The outcome vote is just a single thing, right? So you have one choice whether to vote for, say, Jaggu or not. But whether you like or not like Jaggu, there are going to be 100 factors. Economic issues, social and cultural issues, whether you like the face of the candidate or not, whether you like the leader of the party or not. So many things. So at the end of the day, what we think or we tend to do, we pick our favorite issue and we think, oh, economy was bad. Why has government come back to power? But that's now how it always works. I'm not saying economy does not matter to voters, but there are other equally important issues on which voters think.
And what are those?
Yes, we want to come to those important issues, because rosy roti should be priority, but there's also ideologies, there's also religion, there's also, well, anti-religion, as it were. So what has played a part over here?
So depends. So in each of these states, a combination of different factors work. Now, when you think about, like, there could be n number of issues, but for brevity, let's just think of economy, which is related to, say, unemployment or price rise or how you are doing economically. Then there could be issues related to, say, national security, foreign policy, and these matter in US a lot, and even in Indian elections. In 2019, national security concerns became really important. In fact, I showed using a data point which was collected in 2018 and in 2019, two survey data points. Between these two things, only one thing happened, which was Pulwama and Balakot. Economy didn't improve. But even people who were saying they were having difficulties on economy in 2019, even their percentage came down, right? So basically, nationalistic lens became things to look at, even economic concerns, cultural issues such as religion and identity issues. And what we also make a mistake here, it's not that I'm born into a certain caste and that's why I associate with a political party. The caste and party relationship is a bit complex. It's also about whether a party is going to cater to concerns and issues which are related to my caste, right? So if I come from a lower caste, I'm looking for a political party which is going to fight for my rights, right? And so that's how those relationships work.
Yeah, I'm not born into voting for a particular party, but if that particular party promises me benefits based on status, stature, I'm not sure what the right word is, so then I'm attracted to vote for that party. But Rahul, now let me ask you this. Elections are done, voting is done, counts are done. We know the results clearly. Is this an indicator to 2024? Should PM Modi now believe that he is a shoo-in to win the next, general election?
He's certainly ahead in the race. See what happens in India whenever such important elections take place, or perhaps in other parts of the world. Most elections like this get called as semi-final elections. And I keep telling people, semi-final only, like if you win the semi-final, it only gives you the ticket to win, play the finals.
To play the final.
Play the finals, right? It does not ensure you that you're going to win the final. At the moment, definitely a win in a politically significant state like UP puts BJP ahead in the race. And especially given the kind of dominance BJP enjoys vis-a-vis nationally. In states, they have been having troubles.
Yeah.
Right. But nationally, their main challenger is 200 seats or 250 seats behind them. So they have a lot of catch up to do. So even if BJP say fall short, they are more likely to be ahead in 2024 race than anyone else.
So if we ask you specifically about the states and the results that came, I think for UP, people were surprised that, despite the Hathras incident, despite Lakhimpuri Kheri, where a sitting minister's son has run over farmers, even those constituencies voted for BJP, and people are like, what? Like, I mean, I think that's boggling the minds of a lot of the liberals, saying यहाँ पे कैसे, ये कैसे हुआ in these particular constituencies कैसे? Do you have a theory as to what happened?
So मैं ये बार-बार I keep saying that logic of protest politics and logic of electoral politics basically apply at a very, very different scale. The biggest social movements mobilize at max 5 lakh people. Even the big farmer movements, when you had surrounding Delhi, at max there were 2 or 3 or 4 lakhs people who were part of these things.
Yeah.
A single parliamentary constituency in India has 15 lakh voters at minimum. So the scale at which these two things operate are very different. People who join protest are very different from people who vote. Now, can such issues become on which voters are going to pivot? Sometimes it does, but it also depends on 3 stages. So even when I'm, say, for example, COVID, like COVID was bad, second wave was really bad. And if you go, you will find people who actually lost family members during COVID, but still voted for the BJP. Now, why is that so? One, you can argue that perhaps they're caste or they might be socialized into BJP's scheme of things. That's why they keep voting. But then voters also rationalize certain things, right? The idea is this, what they might have done. So they were unhappy with what happened in COVID. They also think that the government could have done better. But they on that front, they also think that this was a crisis rooted in nature, and Modi and Yogi did what they could have done. If we had anyone else, things could have been worse. So that's how people rationalize things. Now, for any issue, there are always going to be issues in the society. For any issue to become an issue or pivotal issue during election, the opposition parties have not only have to articulate that issue and make it salient, but they have to also convince voters that they are more credible party on that particular issue than the ruling party. So, for example, on the question of jobs, do we have any party which has a better track record in providing jobs in India in comparison to BJP? And on the COVID issue, during the COVID moment, I was arguing and wrote, because then the West Bengal election were happening and results came, that this is a opportune moment for opposition parties to step in. So during the COVID, if the state or the government was missing, the opposition was super missing. They were not there to help people. And so why should people think that opposition is we should vote out the current government and get another party to power?
So I don't know, it's because of what the journalists I follow or the kind of stuff I read. I thought that the Congress party was quite instrumental in getting people oxygen, or at least on social media, they, many people were thanking, say for example, Srinivas, who is the youth Congress leader. He was, and there were cartoonists saying he's the oxygen man, and there were embassies who had tweeted to him saying, "You help us, nobody else is helping us." But was it very little help, or people didn't realize this?
No. I think during those moments, and I remember people were reaching out to not just to Srinivas. There were other people as well, perhaps lesser on the side of the BJP. But you're absolutely right about certain individuals doing a lot of work. But that was limited to about individuals. And perhaps that was happening much more in the metros, people with access to Twitter, not in rural areas. And then if you actually help someone, you have to remind them during time of elections that you actually did that. That's what BJP is good at. Just to give you one statistics, during 2019 election, and this is in the book written by current Union Minister Bhupendra Yadav, that at the beginning of the campaign, BJP was making 3.5 million attempted calls per day, which was 0.5, which increased to 3.5 million calls per day during the peak of the campaign. And what were those calls about? Reminding voters who have benefited from the government schemes to come out and vote. So that's where the organizations on the ground matter. That's where the foot soldiers on the ground matter.
The budgets. I mean, the BJP is the richest party in the country. Doesn't the money really matter? Can anybody go against that amount of money? Because I mean, I know the difference between the BJP coffers and the other parties is like Zameen Asman.
So first point, Tarana, on that, the ruling party anywhere always has, or most of the time has biggest
has the money.
So Congress had a similar advantage between 2004 as BJP has now. Perhaps perhaps the difference might be that the distance between the BJP, BJP coffers versus Congress coffers. So that's one. Second, money is definitely important, but it's not the most important thing that kills election. BJP, with largest cash access to such resources, lost the elections in Delhi twice, lost Jharkhand, lost West Bengal, have not yet been able to make inroads in Tamil Nadu and Karnataka. So despite those kind of resources, you cannot outright win in anything or everything. It certainly makes a difference in places where you might be competitive, and that extra push which you require through campaigns might be helpful.
Rahul, I wanted to come back to a point that you had made, because something immediately struck me when you said protests and politics, the whole social and political scheme of things, are two very different things, even though you would believe one leads to the other. The first thought that came to my mind is that Kejriwal made that leap from social to politics. And this election has been literally a game changer for the Aam Aadmi Party. Now, what did he pull off in Punjab that the others could not, incumbent or opposition?
Okay, so Aam Aadmi Party in that sense is a unique phenomena. Not all social movements successfully manage to convert themselves into political parties and then succeed in very first, second, third election. There are comparable examples. For example, the Assam Students' Union movement in 1985. In fact, the first cabinet of Assam in 1985 literally walked out of the Guwahati Student Union hostel to take oath. Most were basically student union leaders at that time. And you had similar examples, say Kanshi Ram's Dalit movement, which took a decade or two to basically get a hold in UP politics. But not every time such movements can successfully convert them into political force. Very good example is Sanyukt Morcha in Punjab, which was a group of leaders of the farmers movement, right? And they didn't do well. They didn't even get votes in double digits. So not every time it happens. Now, why did Aam Aadmi Party succeed in Punjab this time? One has to remember that there were sort of extraordinary situations in which AAP managed to do what it did. First, Aam Aadmi Party was present in Punjab since 2014. In fact, in 2014, when they won just 4 MPs to the National Parliament, all 4 MPs came from Punjab, not from Delhi. The second point, in 2017, there were again, especially the journalists who were going on the ground, and even some exit polls reported that Aam Aadmi Party is doing really well and they can actually come to power. That didn't happen in 2017, but Aam Aadmi Party emerged as one of the most important player. In fact, they were the leader of the opposition in the House. So there is now a 8-year build-up to what happened in 2022. And then there was the third thing. The third thing was basically the existing pattern of competition got broken. Akali Dal and BJP were allies in Punjab for last 25, 30 years. That got broken. Congress party had won last election with Captain Amrinder Singh. He had to walk out and form a new party. So there were lots of churning even among political players. And then there was anti-incumbency sentiments against both Akalis and Congress of 10 years each. And people were looking for third alternative, which was visible in 2017. And so in 2022, it seems like they said nothing doing, let's all get behind one party. So that was also like, the idea is that it just didn't happen in one go suddenly or in vacuum. There is a 8 to 9 year build up to what we saw last week.
Wow. And then now that also leads us to the elections that will come in between, well, now and the general elections. So we have Gujarat, certainly. We have Jammu and Kashmir. We have Himachal.
Yeah.
What is your reading now? Or let me ask it to you this way. Based on these results, has your reading for those changed?
Again, yes and no. The reason is I wrote a piece 6 or 8 months back saying that a new game has begun among India's political party to occupy the second spot. And that game was actually happening between TMC, Aam Aadmi Party, and Congress. And there was an assumption in that piece as like Congress, Aam Aadmi Party does well in Punjab. I didn't know the extent of victory. That's foolhardy to even predict. And they basically make some inroads in Goa or Uttarakhand. Because now basically there would be a battle to basically, the battle is not, which basically is on Twitter or TV stations about forming the opposition coalition. The battle is actually to take the second spot in Indian politics. And that battle is happening between Aam Aadmi Party, Congress, and TMC. So going forward, AAP will at least try to make decent inroads in Gujarat and Himachal Pradesh. Himachal is next to Punjab, and in Gujarat, they had done well a year ago in Surat municipal election. So they have some traction, and I think they will try to basically move ahead with that traction. And if they do, and if they succeed, it's going to basically, in short run, hurt Congress. In medium to long run, it may also hurt BJP, but in short run, it will hurt Congress. It's very, very difficult to say anything about Jammu and Kashmir because we don't know what's happening in the state. Still, the boundaries are being, political boundaries are being reshaped in the state. The number of seats in Jammu might increase, and those will basically change many things in Jammu and Kashmir. So unless we have more details on that, I would not like to comment on this.
Rahul, at this point, I must ask you, is the only way to challenge the BJP for the opposition parties to figure out a compromise and say, boss, we need to get along and we need to be one united front? Because as long as there's infighting between the TMC and AAP and the Congress, it doesn't look like the voters believe that there is a credible opposition or a credible face. Like, if not Modi, then who? There seems to be no answer to it in the voters' mind.
See, that's not going to solve the problem. The reason it won't solve the problem is that what will TMC add to Congress in Gujarat or Madhya Pradesh? Basically, because each of these players have their own specific basis. So yes, Congress and DMK in Tamil Nadu might come together and challenge BJP. Or Mamata Banerjee with Congress in West Bengal can challenge BJP. But TMC does not have any base in the state of Madhya Pradesh or Gujarat or Rajasthan. And essentially what's happening in the last two elections, in 2014 and 2019, BJP actually swept Northwest India. Most of the states where it's the BJP versus Congress competition, BJP won more than 90% of the seats. And that's what is giving them the advantage. In UP, even in 2019, the SP and BSP and RLD, three players came together, yet BJP managed to beat. So I think coming together of opposition parties can only be just one solution or part of the solution. If they have to challenge the BJP, they have to come up with a new political imagination, a new idea of India, a new blueprint, which basically convinces a large section of voters that this is a good alternative. What are these parties doing in, and that was that was reflected in UP's result this time. At the last minute, you are basically trying to cobble up an alliance of political parties and thinking X caste plus Y caste plus Z caste, and we are going to win. That's not going to happen. You need these social coalitions for sure, but then you need something extra, some grand narrative, some overarching vision, which is going to bring more voters for you. Now, you may agree or disagree with BJP's meta narrative, but they tie everything together. All the micro details, the welfare, the national security, the Hindutva, the caste, everything gets tied into a big ideological narrative. And unless, and then you have the advantages in terms of organizational resources and money, as you mentioned, and leadership. So everything has to be tied together to be able to challenge a force, or I should say, an election machine like BJP at the moment.
Rahul, you make an interesting point about having a fresh viewpoint, a larger imagination, as it were. Now, the BJP seems to own what you just described. The welfare, the religion, the
national
security angle. So are you saying perhaps that we need a viewpoint that competes against these, or do we need a whole different viewpoint? Somebody saying that the economy is more important than all of this. I mean, what is the citizen, the voter looking for? Is it just this narrative because there's no one else banging the narrative, therefore it is a BJP thing, or can there be a whole different side to the story?
No, that's a difficult question, actually, Jaggu, to answer. And it's difficult to figure out what that group of voters want. So there is certainly, BJP is hovering between 35 and 40% of votes, right? So there is 60% of votes which is not going for the BJP. And the opposition, whoever has to become the claimant of opposition vote, they have to find the median of this 60% of votes and try to mobilize. BJP has found its median in terms of national security pitch, in terms of Hindutva pitch, in terms of welfare outreach. How do you find what that ideological vision is? That can't come from a social scientist or a political strategist. That has to come from a leaders. That's why they are leaders. They figure out what the vision of India is. Mahatma Gandhi figured out how he's going to basically lead the national freedom movement. Or Nehru figured out what would the Congress party of 50s and 60s look like. So, or Kanshiram figured out what Dalit politics should look like, or Lalu Yadav figured out how backward politics should look like. So that vision has to be created by leaders. It cannot come from me or a political strategist or you. That's what the job of leadership is. It has to come organically.
Because I know that, the Congress party tried to fight a clean election, because every speech of theirs was like, no, we will talk about unemployment, we will talk about economy, we will talk about jobs, we will talk about COVID mismanagement, we will not talk religion, we will not. Did that not work? Or they said all the right things, but they were the wrong people saying all the right things?
Something like that. Basically, they were picking up right issues. And in fact, Priyanka Gandhi did a lot of hard work in UP. I would say, given her organizational structure in UP, Priyanka Gandhi did more work than what you would have expected Akhilesh Yadav to do, given his organizational structure or his party. Now, Congress is going through a very difficult and different kind of crisis. And in many states, see, for example, in UP, their fate is not going to change in one election. They are a single-digit party for last 30 years. At max, you could only become a double-digit party. You can't form government by working hard in 1 year. But then the circumstances also force how voters are going to act. So despite Priyanka Gandhi making right noises, her vote share actually came down. And the reason it came down, because the structure of competition became bipolar. So voters are not going to waste their vote on party which is going to be third or fourth or fifth. They are basically trying to be on the side of winner. And when bipolarity will develop in a system, even a party like BSP got reduced to just one seat. Remember, 20 years ago, they were in power in UP. So bipolarity, and bipolarity is developing in almost all states where you have a significant Muslim population and BJP as an important player. We saw that in Assam, Bengal, Bihar, and now in UP. So that trend will continue, and a party like SP in UP will face the same challenge as BJP will face in West Bengal. It's basically, at the end of the day, also the structure of competition, as I mentioned, the underlying competition. Second point on Congress, if you look at all other states, like they were poised to do well in 4 states, and they are basically nil this time. So in all those states, they are going through same kind of problem, not being alert during election. So let me give you just one example. Punjab was basically a crisis within the Punjab Congress was precipitated by Navjot Singh Sidhu last year, raising some issues and basically forcing the hands of the Congress party to ask Chief Minister Amrinder Singh to step down, saying there is a lot of anti-incumbency against him. Amrinder Singh he did not just step down. In fact, the situation went so bad that he was humiliated. In the process, Congress party basically made everyone happy, everyone unhappy. All top 4 leaders. So Navjot Singh Sidhu was not made the chief minister. He was unhappy, sulking, firing salvos at the next chief minister, Charanjit Singh Channi. Till the very last month, Charanjit Singh Channi, who was appointed as the chief minister after removal of Amrinder Singh, was not backed by the party that we are going with this phase. They basically delayed that decision. Then one leader of Congress party said, Sunil Jakhar, who was the president of the Congress party in Punjab, he cannot become the chief minister because he's a Hindu. So you eliminated him. Then Randhawa and other leaders were also eliminated. When this whole thing was basically happening, who was dousing the fire? Harish Rawat, who was the main leader of the Congress party in Uttarakhand. So while he should have been in Uttarakhand campaigning for the party, because there was a good chance BJP had
changed so many chief ministers.
But your main person, who should have been in Uttarakhand, was in Punjab for almost a year trying to douse the fire.
Wow.
Okay. So that's the kind. So you can make noise, but if you write noise, but if you are not alert and doing the right things on the ground, then so Uttarakhand also, they lost while they had a good chance to win that state.
So Rahul, before we let you go, let me ask you what most would believe is a touchy question. Would the Congress party, technically the grand old party, be better served if the Gandhis were not at the helm of affairs?
Okay, so I'll send you a piece that I wrote for Times of India yesterday after the meeting on Sunday. And the crux of the piece is basically Congress decides again not to decide or decide later. And the idea is this, basically a situation like this for a party like Congress in any other part of the world would have led to open rebellion. The party would have imploded. And a new, not just leadership, but a new idea within the party would have emerged. Parties go through electoral reversals. Losing elections is not a big deal for parties. They win and lose elections. But when you are going through a serious crisis like this, and not for like last 8 years, it's happening for last 3 decades, where you are in a motion of perpetual decline, something much like drastic needed to be done. So Labour Party in Britain came up with the idea of New Labour after their series of losses, or Liberal Party in Canada, or the LDP in Japan. The Congress party is basically not going to implode. And the reason is it is not going to implode. One, because they don't have any leader except Gandhi's who can mobilize and win any state on their own, even during the lean period. And this was systematically done through 70s and 80s to basically not let towering leaders within the Congress party develop. The second one is, so the vertical split is not going to happen. Congress leaders basically live in now what I call in that piece as part of Congress mythology. They have developed mythology that only like, and there are 5 elements to that mythology. So they live in that bubble. Basically going forward, in the short run, Congress party is going to have difficult time. It's going to see more leaders walking out of its fold, and I don't see any signs of revival of this present Congress. If the shape and form of Congress changes, it cannot happen suddenly. Only then we can hope for a revival, and that to medium to long run. For next 2-3 years, we'll see something like this keep happening.
Wow.
Wow, because unfortunately, as you said, there are no other national level parties. And for a democracy to flourish, you need a credible opposition.
True.
Because, like fans of the present BJP government should also want somebody to keep them accountable. Have
Definitely.
an opposition basically say, hey, you did this, not good, please do better. But right now, there's nobody. Which then,
Tarana,
too much power, right? In the hands of anybody is never good for the people. But it is quite depressing that there is really no credible opposition.
True. Just to add to this, in UP, even when the BJP won, in the exit poll or survey data, there are clear signs for which BJP should be worried. Basically, BJP is no longer the most preferred party among young voters, among students, and among unemployed. So there are people have concerns over economy, right?
Okay.
But that has to be mobilized. And now BJP can think that because there is no effective electoral opposition, we don't have to really do anything, as you were saying, right? But then what would happen if there are no effective electoral opposition, which is not good in democracies? Basically, all those anxieties, all those aspirations will then get channelized on the streets. And there is a reason why you are seeing more protest, because there are no effective electoral opposition. And so the depressing thought going forward is that we are going to see more street level mobilization. And that's not good for any country.
Ooh.
So,
give us some hope as we let you go.
Yes. You've given us a lot of food for thought. Not all of it optimistic.
No, but I think the hope is one, not just from the opposition. We have to basically stop grandstanding and make a realistic assessment of the situation. As a society, we are getting polarized, which is not good. So what we need, and this has to happen from both sides of the aisle, is a dialogue, a shared consensus, a shared vision for India. 2022 is actually 75th year of our independence. And this is the right time that we basically think, okay, where should this country be in 2047? And we basically make a plan, a chart out a trajectory that in 25 years, this is what we as a country can achieve. There are always going to be political and electoral differences, and that's good for democracies. Democracies actually thrive on differences. But if we are not going to have a dialogue, which is happening now, and happening much more because of social media, where we are just doing grandstanding and virtue signaling, that's not basically, then we are each of these groups are moving into their own echo chambers. And if dialogue is not going to be there, then we will never have a shared vision or a shared path. And so that's what is needed. And I don't know where this would come from. This should come from politics, but it should also come from civil society. It should come from people like you, from other domains of the society.
Be the change you want to see.
Yes. Absolutely right. It's the effort that each individual puts in, and not just wait for a political leader or a political party to make a move. That's probably where the change will come from, as it should, from the grassroots. Rahul, thank you so much for this. It was a pleasure, as well as an eye-opener. Like we said, there's a lot of food for thought, and perhaps once things settle down or the next elections come around, please expect to be back on our show so that you can explain the details of that to us further. But
well, thank you, Jaggu, and thank you, Tarana.
Much.
This was fun. This was fun talking to you both. I loved the way. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. And before we let you go, please,
yes.
That is Rahul. You've seen his Twitter handle. Please follow him. There are many articles by his book from 2018. Follow him. Please like this video if you and talk to us in the comments. There's so much food for thought. Talk to us. Tell us what you think. What is your analysis? We'll get Rahul to then go through the comments too. Subscribe, like this channel, and share with people you think are like-minded. Thank you for watching. Thank you, Rahul. Okay, bye.
Bye. Thank you.